We're going to take a look at different ways to create modal windows in JavaScript and jQuery. And the first technique we are going to look at is using a button and JavaScript code. And basically what a modal is, it's just a window that overlays, and they typically will have an X so you can close them. And they're used for errors, warnings, to collect data from users. You may have a fillable form, confirmation information, or they're used as helpers. And so this would be considered a helper because it's giving more information. And then to close it, we just click on the X. And so here the button is the trigger. You could also have a link as a trigger, and we'll show you the code for that next. And here you can see that I've got the styling right in here. And so I've got a modal class that I am styling. And this is hidden. You can see I've got all sorts of comments in here. So you can kind of follow what the code is doing and why it's there. But obviously, when you first come into the page, the modal is not displayed. Then when the modal is displayed, you want the position to be fixed and it needs to sit on top. So you have to use the index. And then it's just a matter of positioning where you want it to go. And that is basically what all of this is doing. And then I've got some coloring that I am setting. And you may have noticed when I click on this that the background gets a little grayed out. Okay, and if I scroll, my modal does not move. Okay, and that's all done through styling. That's all done here. So you can see I've got the height and width set. If you don't want it to span the whole width, okay, then set it to something else. And it's going to span the width of the container that it's in. Keep in mind that wherever you've placed the modal, you've put it inside other elements, and so it is going to be constrained by the width of those elements. And you can see down here that I've got a division here, class set to modal, ID is my modal, and then I've got modal content. To get the little X on the right-hand side, that is simply a span tag. This HTML entity code, &times, is used for the X, and I gave it a class of close. So this is styled as well. And so if we kind of come up here and look, there's quite a bit of styling for close that we'll cover in a minute. Modal content, I've given it a background color, some padding so that the text isn't right up against the edge, gave it a little border, set the width at 80%. Okay, modal has a width of 100%. Okay, so we have modal right here, and then we have modal content right here. And let's see, let's look at the styling for close. I have a close class, so I set a color and float right, which is why the X is on the right-hand side. I gave it a little bigger size because by default it comes in quite small, and I boldface so to make it stand out a little bit more. For hovering over it or clicking on it, I have set the color, made sure there is not no underlining on it, and the cursor becomes a pointer. Okay, so you see when I point at it, when I'm hovering here, how the color changes, and also when I focus on it and click on it. Okay, so that's what's happening there. I have a center class to center align whatever I want. In this case, it is everything on the page. And then article has a width of 50% and a background of white. So everything in the article section, okay, which is right here, has a width of 50, background of white. Okay, and then body has a background of black. So that's how I'm getting kind of the white on the black. Okay, so you can see here, we've got article, then I've got a button. This is at the very bottom. Gave it an idea of my button. And then below the bottom of the content, the button, that's where I've got the modal code. And by default, you already saw this, but the display is set to none, which is why you can't see it. So then in the JavaScript section, we've got document get element by ID, my modal. That is referring to this. Okay, and that's being stored in modal. And then we are storing document.getElement by ID, my button, in button. And then the document.getElements by class name, close, the first occurrence of close, there is only one, is given a variable of span. So when we click on the button, we're going to run through an anonymous function that basically displays the modal. So we changed the style.display to block. It was none, now it's block. Then we have a little code here so that when they click on the X, okay, and the X is represented now by span, when they click on that X, then we turn the modal off, basically. We set the display to none. Now, the way we want this set up is if this comes up and let's say they click outside of the modal, we would also like it to close. They don't have to click right on the X. So if they click anywhere else, it should close as well. And that's what this code is doing. So if they click in the window, okay, then we run through this anonymous function and we hide the modal. So if the modal is displayed, then we hide it. And that's pretty much all the code. Okay, there's much more going on here in the CSS than in the JavaScript.